Kuta village was the kind of place that time had forgotten. Top deep in the wild belly of the land, it sat at the edge of the ancient and brooding whispering forest, where trees leaned in like old gossipers and the wind spoke secrets only the brave dared to listen to. The villagers lived simple lives, planting yams, raising goats, telling stories by firelight, and keeping far from the shadows of the woods. No one dared venture deep into the forest. Not even the boldest hunters. Among the dusty huts and cracked clay roads of Kuta lived a boy named Lumo. At 18, Lumo was neither strong nor wealthy. He had no family name to carry, no farmland to inherit, and no goats to call his own. His parents had died when he was barely 5, victims of a fever that swept through the village like a jealous wind. Since then, he'd grown up sleeping in old sheds, eating scraps, and mending shoes just to get by. But Lumo had one thing no one else in Kuta seemed to have anymore: dreams. Not the kind you tell before sleep, but wild, burning dreams that chased him awake at night. He believed, with all the foolish faith of youth, that he was meant for more. When he walked through the village, he didn't just see cracked mud huts, he imagined castles made of glass and gold. When he saw the king's guards in their colorful robes, he saw himself sitting on a throne beside them. But to everyone else, Lumo was just a hungry orphan with a head full of air. The village boys mocked him. Look at Lumo, always staring at the sky. Maybe he's waiting for coins to fall from the clouds. The girls ignored him, sweeping past him like dust in the wind. The elders scoffed. That boy has no roots. Like a tree with no ground, he will fall. And still, Lumo dreamed. At night, while others slept, he'd sit by the village fire and listen to old men and women trade tales. Among these stories, one always stood out. A tale that seemed more warning than wonder. The legend of Mbora, the forest spirit. He is small, the elders would say, no taller than your knee, with eyes that glow like coals and skin like braided vines. He carries a mat woven from the hair of the earth itself. Whoever touches it, wealth will follow like shadow. But Mbora is not a giver without price. His gifts are borrowed, never free. Children huddled close when the stories came. Even the fire seemed to flicker lower when Mbora's name was spoken. It is said, whispered one old widow, that only on moonless nights does he walk near the river bend, just beyond the forest breadth. But beware, if you take what is his without permission, Mbora will not chase you. He will wait, and collect when you least expect. Lumo listened with wide eyes, his heart pounding not with fear, but hope. A mat that could bring riches. A spirit who gave gold to those who dared. Maybe this was his chance. His key. His purpose. The idea planted itself in his mind like a seed. And slowly, it grew. One afternoon, as Lumo sat beneath a crooked palm repairing a sandal, an old beggar passed by. He was blind, his eyes white as fog, and his clothes ragged. Most people ignored him, dropping crusts of bread at his feet and walking on. But Lumo stood, bowed his head, and offered him water. You are kind, the old man rasped, sipping. Most boys your age think kindness makes them weak. Lumo smiled shyly. I have nothing else to give. The old man nodded. Then, after a long pause, he leaned in and whispered something that made the hairs on Lumo's neck stand. You seek Mbora's mat, don't you? Lumo froze. How do you know? I may not see with these eyes, the man said, tapping them gently, but I see with the ones that matter. He leaned even closer. Tonight is a moonless night. If you wish to find him, follow the river until it hums. And when it hums, wait. But child, remember this, what you take from a spirit is never fully yours. Before Lumo could ask more, the man rose and walked off, slow and silent, like a shadow dissolving into dusk. That evening, Lumo didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He packed a small pouch of dry gari, tied a charm around his neck, one his mother had left him, and waited for darkness to swallow the village. The moon never rose. As silence blanketed Kuta, Lumo stepped out of the village, barefoot and quiet as a ghost. The road to the river was old and winding, lined with whispering grasses and strange glowing insects. As he walked, the air thickened. The sky turned blacker than charcoal. Even the stars seemed to hide. The trees of the whispering forest stood like guards at the edge of the path, their trunks twisted, their branches curved like fingers. The deeper he went, the less the world felt like home. The air was cooler here, the shadows heavier. Lumo followed the river's curve, just as the beggar had told him. After a while, he began to hear something faint, a hum. It wasn't the wind or the water. It was deeper. Softer. Like someone humming a lullaby in a language forgotten by time. He stopped. He was here. The river bend opened into a small clearing surrounded by trees that leaned inward like curious old women. In the middle of the clearing lay a mat, no larger than a towel, woven from green, gold, and red fibers that shimmered even in the dark. Strange symbols glowed on its edges. And beside it stood the spirit. Mora. He was tiny. No taller than Lumo's waist. His skin looked like bark and shadow woven together. His eyes burned a dim red, not cruel, but tired. His fingers were long and knotted like tree roots. He didn't speak. He just watched. Lumo's heart thudded. Every part of him screamed to run. But something stronger, his longing, his hunger for more, held him still. Slowly, Lumo stepped forward, his hands open. I don't come to steal, he said, voice shaking. I come to ask. Just a chance. One night. Let me carry the mat. Mora's eyes narrowed. He blinked once, slowly. Then he nodded. The mat lifted gently into the air, floating like a leaf, and landed at Lumo's feet. The spirit spoke for the first time. His voice was neither loud nor soft, but it echoed inside Lumo's chest like thunder in a cave. One night. Return it before dawn. Do not delay. Do not stray. Lumo nodded, hardly breathing. He lifted the mat. The world changed. From the moment his fingers touched the fibers, the air exploded with color. Coins fell like rain from the sky. Trees bloomed diamonds. The ground at his feet turned golden, and the river ran thick with silver. The mat pulsed with power. His hands tingled. His heart soared. This was what he had waited for his entire life. Without another word, Lumo turned and ran, back through the forest, across the path, through the silent village and into his tiny shed. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He just stared at the mat and smiled, tears on his face. Tomorrow, he would return it. Tomorrow, his life would begin. But somewhere in the forest, Mbara watched the boy disappear into the night, and turned his gaze toward the moonless sky, waiting. The whispering forest was no ordinary place. The deeper Lumo went, the more it felt like the trees were watching him. The wind didn't blow, it spoke. It didn't howl, it whispered. Words he couldn't understand, sounds that curled around his ears like invisible fingers. Every footstep stirred leaves that rustled too loud. Every breath felt borrowed. The moonless night was in black, and the torch he carried flickered as if uncertain whether it wanted to stay lit. Even the insects, always loud in the village, were strangely quiet here. Silence, thick and living, wrapped around him like a cloak. But Lumo didn't turn back. He was afraid, yes. His knees shook, his chest tightened. But under the fear was a fire. A hunger. He had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Following the soundless river deeper than any boy in Kuta had dared to go, Lumo saw something strange just ahead. A faint light. Not from fire or moon, but from the ground itself. As he crept closer, the air turned sweet, like honey and overripe fruit. His skin tingled. The trees around him seemed to bend away, revealing a circle of glowing mushrooms, perfectly arranged on a patch of soft earth. In the center of the circle sat a small figure. Mora. He looked exactly as the stories described, but there was something about him that felt ancient. Not old in years, but old in presence. Like he had existed before time had found words. His skin was dark like burnt bark, but it shimmered with moss-green veins. His eyes, round and red, glowed softly. And before him lay the mat, a beautiful piece of woven fabric that pulsed with colors Lumo couldn't name. Golds, reds, and deep forest greens intertwined, and the edges sparkled with floating symbols that drifted off like smoke. Mora didn't move. He just watched Lumo, like someone expecting a visitor. Lumo stepped carefully into the mushroom ring. The air inside was still and warm. Lumo began, then swallowed hard. I came to ask. Just for one night. Let me carry the mat. I swear I will return it before the first light of dawn. The spirit blinked. His voice, when it came, was soft, like the rustle of silk, yet it echoed in Lumo's chest. Why do you seek what is not yours? Lumo looked at the ground. Because I have nothing. I was born with nothing. I don't want to steal. I just want a chance. A way out. Bora tilted his head. Many who have asked before you were not brave enough to return. Are you? Lumo nodded quickly. Yes. I will return it. I swear on my mother's charm. He reached under his shirt and showed the small wooden talisman that hung from his neck. The spirit stared at it for a long time. Then he nodded once. You may carry it. One night. Return it by dawn. If you do not, it will not be me who finds you. It will be the forest. Lumo stepped forward. The moment his fingers brushed the mat, a surge of warmth raced through his veins. The mat lifted itself slightly, light as a leaf, and settled into his arms. It felt alive, soft and warm, like it had a heartbeat. Then the forest changed. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet turned gold. Actual gold. Trees around him dropped silver fruits the size of mangoes. The river nearby gurgled, not with water, but with coins, tumbling over each other like fish. From the rocks bloomed gems and jewels, sparkling in the dark. Lumo gasped. His eyes filled with tears. Was this what it felt like to be seen by the gods? He clutched the mat and turned back toward the village, his heart thudding like a drum. He didn't look back. Didn't speak. He just ran. By the time he reached the edge of Kuta, the sky was still black, but a sliver of blue threatened the horizon. He ran to the only home he had. An abandoned goat shed on the hill near the yam fields, and carefully laid the mat down on the floor. He couldn't sleep. His body buzzed with energy. He looked outside, then back at the mat. Even now, in the dark, it glowed softly, humming gently like a sleeping child. He dared not touch it again. Instead, he sat and waited. Every now and then, he peeked outside. He didn't know the exact moment the sun would rise, but he felt it drawing near, like a tide pulling him. When the first rooster crowed, he wrapped the mat in an old cloth and slipped quietly out. No one saw him as he crept back into the whispering forest. The golden path he had seen the night before was gone. The forest had returned to its cold, grey self. But Lumo found the mushroom circle. Bora was waiting. Lumo stepped inside, knelt, and placed the mat gently at the spirit's feet. I kept my word, he said, breathless. Thank you. The spirit said nothing for a moment. Then he reached out and placed one thin finger on Lumo's forehead. You may return, Bora said. If you ask. But remember this, child, ask. Never take. The mat listens. And it never forgets. Lumo nodded. The moment he stepped outside the circle, he felt lighter, freer. The whispering of the forest faded. The sun began to rise. In the days that followed, everything changed. First, Lumo found coins in his old shoes. Then, a man who once refused to trade with him offered him 5 goats for his sandal-making skills. A traveler gave him a bag of rice in exchange for directions. Bit by bit, fortune began to find him. But unlike in the tales, Lumo did not become kingly. Not yet. He used what he had wisely. Bought tools, fixed up the old shed, and started a proper business repairing sandals and carving wooden walking sticks. People came from other villages to buy them. Children followed him. Girls began to smile. Elders stopped mocking him. Still, Lumo stayed humble. He remembered the mat. He remembered the forest. And most of all, he remembered More's voice. But inside him, something had shifted. Not in an evil way. Just in the quiet hunger that grows when you taste something rare. He would sit under the mango tree and think. What if I could carry it again? Just once more. What if I asked? Surely Mora would allow it. He told himself he didn't want more gold. Just a little more time. To build a house. To help others. To never go back to being ignored. But he said nothing. Not yet. For now, he waited. And as the days turned to weeks, his hands stayed busy, but his heart beat with a quiet longing. Some nights, when the moon was gone and the wind whispered just right, Lumo would wake up in sweat, hearing something that wasn't quite a dream. A voice, soft as moss and old as time. Ask. Never take. And deeper still, another voice, his own, perhaps, but heavier. But what if I don't ask? The seasons changed, and so did Lumo. From the dusty, barefoot boy in torn rags, Lumo rose like the sun after a long, harsh night. His wealth grew, not in waves, but steady as rain on good earth. He began small, buying abandoned farmland at the edge of the village. With the coins that had appeared after his night with the mat, he hired laborers, cleared bushes, and planted yam, cassava, and plantain. The harvests were bountiful. People began to talk. Isn't that Lumo? The orphan boy? Yes. But look now, he owns half the yam fields. And did you hear? He built a school for the children last week. He didn't stop there. He hired masons to rebuild broken huts. Paid off debts for widows. Built a well near the village square so no one would ever thirst again. The market women sang his praises. Children ran to greet him when he passed, and the elders, those who once called him useless, now called him young chief. The village chief himself invited Lumo to a feast. There, under lantern-lit trees and pounding drums, the chief clapped his back and said, "You have done what many princes could not. You bring wealth, not just to yourself, but to your people. Take this land," he said, pointing to the hills beyond the yam fields, "and make it yours." Lumo bowed deeply. His heart swelled, not just with gratitude, but with something sharper. Something hotter. Pride. Girls now braided their hair extra carefully when they passed his home. They brought him roasted plantains, soups in covered bowls, letters folded in flowers. But Lumo kept to himself, living in a house newly built with polished wood, tiled floors, and wide windows. The mat, though long returned to Mbora, still haunted his thoughts. He had only tasted it once. Touched it once. And yet, it had changed everything. Some nights, when he lay alone in his soft bed, he'd stare at the ceiling and think. What if I carried it again? Just one more night, what would happen? He had not asked. Not yet. He told himself he was being wise. Being patient. But temptation is a patient shadow, it waits, then whispers when you're most full of yourself. And Lumo, whether he knew it or not, was getting full. One morning, a dust-covered caravan arrived at the village gates. Guards in bright red armor led the way, followed by gold-painted chariots and sleek horses. The entire village gathered as word spread like fire: a prince had arrived. Prince Egbere, son of the great king of the eastern mountains, had come on a tour of distant villages. Tall, proud, and with an entourage of servants and dancers, Egbere walked through Kuta with his nose slightly raised, until he met Lumo. The prince blinked in surprise. You are the one they call the Golden Boy." Lumo smiled humbly. "I am Lumo. A farmer, nothing more." "Farmer?" Egbere laughed. "You have more land than most noble families. These people speak of you like a legend. Tell me, how did you rise so fast?" The village fell silent. Lumo opened his mouth, then closed it. What could he say? That he borrowed a mat from a forest spirit and it rained gold. Instead, he smiled. "Hard work," he said. "And maybe a bit of blessing." Egbere looked at him for a long moment. Then he laughed and clapped Lumo's back. "I like you, farmer. One day, come to my father's palace. You may find friends there." The villagers cheered. Drums pounded. The celebration began. But Lumo's smile faded quickly. Because inside him a fire had begun to burn. A voice whispered, "Blessing." No. It wasn't just that. It was the mat. You touched the sky once. Why not again? That night, long after the music died and the last dancer slept, Lumo sat alone in his room. He looked out at the hills, the lanterns, the wide stretch of land that now bowed to his name. He should have been satisfied. He should have felt full. But pride has a way of making enough feel empty. And so, he made a decision. No more asking. No more waiting. He would go back to the forest. And this time, he would take. Lumo waited until everyone was asleep. He wore no fine robes. Just his old clothes, the ones he used to wear when he had nothing. He carried no torch, no bag. Only his mother's charm, still hanging from his neck. The whispering forest welcomed him like an old friend. It had changed little. The air was still thick. The shadows still moved too much. And the silence still watched him. But Lumo wasn't afraid. Not this time. He knew the path now. He walked with purpose, deeper and deeper, until the sweet scent filled the air and the glow of the mushroom ring returned. There it was. The mat. But Mbora was not there. Lumo hesitated. He should wait. He should ask. But the prince's laughter echoed in his mind. "How did you rise so fast?" Lumo stepped into the ring. "I'm not stealing," he whispered, almost like a prayer. "I'm just borrowing again. Like last time." He reached down and touched the mat. Nothing happened. Then, boom! The ground shook lightly. A soft humming rose from the forest floor. The mat lifted, gentle and warm, and curled itself into Lumo's arms. Then the world changed. As he stepped out of the ring, the trees shimmered. From their branches flew golden birds, feathers glowing like fireflies. The river nearby now flowed with perfume, sweet and thick, its scent making the air dizzy. Rubies sprouted in his path, crunching underfoot like gravel. Lumo gasped. He ran home, mat in hand, unable to stop smiling. By morning, his compound had transformed. A fountain poured sweet oils. The courtyard glowed with red gems. Birds of flame sat on his rooftop, singing songs no one had ever heard. Villagers screamed in awe. Children dropped to their knees. The women wept at the beauty of it all. Lumo stood at the center, wrapped in gold-threaded robes, and nodded. This was it. This was the power. This was the life he deserved. But as night came, things began to shift. It started with the mirrors. Lumo walked past one in his hallway and saw himself, but not quite. His reflection lagged, eyes slower to blink, mouth twitching slightly offbeat. He tried another mirror. Same thing. The reflection was watching him. Next, the shadows. When the lanterns flickered, he noticed the shadows in his room weren't falling right. They stretched toward him when he walked. Curled under the mat like claws. Sometimes, even when he stood still, his shadow moved. Then came the whispers. At first, faint. Lumo. Then louder. Return it. He tore the mat from its resting place and threw it into the storage hut. But it kept glowing, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. He covered it with cloth. Still, he heard it. That night, he didn't sleep. The next day, the villagers noticed he looked tired. Pale. He blamed the moon. Said he was fasting. Said the spirit of wealth had asked him for silence. But inside, Lumo knew. He had broken the rules. He had not asked. He had taken. And Mbora was watching. Lumo did not return the mat. He didn't even hide it anymore. He placed it boldly in his grand hall, atop a pedestal carved from ebony, beneath a skylight that poured sun onto its woven surface like a spotlight. The mat shimmered and hummed softly, its threads curling like smoke, moving when no one touched it. Let them come and see, Lumo would say to visitors. This is the heart of my success. The world gave me nothing, but this mat gave me everything. And so, he built towers of glass and stone, carved with golden lions. Roads lined with scented trees. A new palace, taller than the chief's own compound. He paid dancers from far-off cities to perform daily. He threw feasts that lasted for days, meat, wine, and music flowing endlessly. He renamed the village Lumo's land, had it carved into stone at every entrance. Children were taught to sing songs praising him. The chief was given a house at the edge of the town, beautiful, but far from the center, where Lumo now ruled like a king. Some villagers cheered. Others murmured. A few elders began whispering behind closed doors. There was something wrong in the air. Not just with Lumo, but with the land itself. The mat had changed. It still sparkled, but not with joy. Its vibrant reds, greens, and golds had faded to dull rust, moss, and blood. It paused at night, louder now, humming a tune no one could place. It was no longer soft. It was sharp, its edges curling like claws. When the wind blew, the mat lifted slightly, flapping as though it were breathing. People noticed. Then came the crying. One night, a woman ran to the town square, her eyes wide with fear. Did you hear it? The forest, it cries. Others nodded. Night after night, strange sounds echoed from the edge of the woods, the sound of a baby crying. But when villagers searched, no child was ever found. The forest remained empty, but the cries continued, soft, eerie, and wrong, like something pretending to be human. Still, Lumo laughed it off. Ghost stories, he scoffed. The forest weeps because it envies our joy. But the joy was fading. One morning, a young boy named Toby wandered into Lumo's palace with his mother, who came to offer flowers to the golden idol at the entrance. While she knelt in prayer, Toby saw the mat glowing behind the curtains and, curious, tiptoed forward. He touched it. His eyes rolled back. He collapsed on the spot. For days, he didn't wake. His chest rose and fell, slow and steady, but he would not speak, would not move. The town healer poured herbs into his mouth. The priestess sang ancient songs. Nothing worked. On the third night, the village priestess had a dream. In it, she stood in a forest clearing beneath a sky that burned red. The trees leaned inward, weeping sap. The air was thick with whispers. And before her stood Mora. He looked different now. Thinner. Taller. His skin cracked and glowing from within. His eyes no longer red, but black and endless. He stole from me, the spirit said. Now, I take from him. One breath at a time. When she awoke, she knew. The curse had begun. Strange things became common. At night, the mat no longer lay flat. It floated. It curled and twisted, weaving itself through Lumo's room like a serpent. Sometimes it hung in the air, spinning slowly above his bed, whispering in a language he could almost understand. Lumo began waking with nosebleeds. He stopped dreaming. He didn't sleep much anymore. And when he looked into his mirror one morning, he screamed. His reflection was gone. The glass showed only the room behind him, but not him. He waved. Nothing. He touched the mirror. Cold. Still nothing. Servants rushed in, but when they looked, everything seemed normal. You're tired, sir, they said. Too many feasts, perhaps. But Lumo knew. Something had shifted. The land responded. The trees surrounding the village, once tall and fruit-laden, began to rot. Their trunks turned black, their leaves fell out of season. Birds stopped singing. Goats gave birth to stillborn kids. Crops withered, even when rains came. The people grew restless. We were blessed, they said, but now the gods are angry. Some blamed the mat. Others dared not speak its name. But all of them looked toward the palace with fear in their eyes. The elders gathered. One by one, they walked to Lumo's palace, heads bowed, canes in hand. They were old, but determined. Inside the golden hall, they stood before him, Lumo, dressed in silk, his eyes shadowed with sleeplessness, his hands trembling slightly. You must return it, said the oldest among them. That mat, it is not for us. It is not meant to be held. You broke a rule, child. Rule. Lumo snapped. What rule? The forest offered me nothing. I took what I needed. You asked the first time, another elder said. And Mora allowed it. But now, you have stolen. And the land is paying the price. Return it, the first elder said again, voice low. Before more harm comes. Lumo stood from his throne. His voice was sharp, angry. No. It's mine now. I built this village. I fed its people. I saved it. And now you want me to throw away the very thing that gave us all this. It's not a gift, one whispered. It's a loan. Then let it collect from someone else. Lumo shouted. I'm not giving it back. The elders left, silent. One turned back and said, then may the spirits show mercy. Because the forest won't. That night, the mat moved again. This time, it hovered higher, spinning faster. The hum turned into a shriek. It let out a cry, high, sharp, like metal tearing flesh. The windows shattered. Servants ran screaming. Flames burst from the oil lamps. The palace shook. And Lumo. He knelt before the mat, clutching his mother's charm, eyes wide with terror. I won't give you back, he whispered. You made me. You belong to me. But the mat said nothing. It only spun, and waited. 7 moons had passed since Lumo stole the mat. Each moon had grown stranger, eclipses that shouldn't have happened, birds flying in circles until they fell from the sky, mothers waking to find their babies pointing at the forest and crying without cause. The earth moaned at night, long low groans like the belly of something ancient and sick. And then came the 7th moon. It rose without stars. It rose red. Not the red of sunset, or fire, or berries, but the red of wounds. The air turned thick like smoke. The river ran backward. And the wind died completely. Even the insects went silent. Kuta village stood still. Children clung to their mothers. Old men sharpened spears out of habit, but no one believed they would help. Dogs hid beneath porches. The drummers left their drums untouched. The chief lit incense, praying to gods he hadn't spoken to in years. Then, it came. At first, it was a shape in the distance, a ripple across the horizon, as if the world itself were bending. Trees bowed in its wake, bending away, as though afraid to block its path. The air turned colder with every step it took. It walked on two legs but left no footprints. Its face was long, smooth, eyeless, until it blinked. And then, burning through the smooth skin, twin orbs of glowing red opened. It was Mora. But not the gentle forest spirit the elders once described in their fireside tales. This was something older. Something changed. Its body looked stretched and dark like tree bark soaked in blood. Its hands, long and split at the ends like woven straw, glowed at the tips. Every time it breathed, a swarm of glowing moths flew from its ribs. Its voice, when it spoke, was layered, 1,000 voices speaking as one. I have come. The village held its breath. No one dared move as Mora glided silently past the chief's hut, past the priestess's shrine, past the children who clung to their mothers and wept. It made its way to the center of the village, once known as Kuta, now renamed by its prideful ruler as Lumo's land. And there, at the highest point, stood the gold-plated mansion, Lumo's fortress of wealth, pride, and power. But inside, Lumo was no longer the man the village remembered. He had not slept in days. The mat no longer obeyed him. It hovered constantly, muttering in languages he did not know. Sometimes it screamed. Sometimes it wept. At night, it covered his windows. He could no longer see the moon. He had sealed the doors. Guards were gone. Servants had fled. He wandered his gilded halls alone, dressed in robes made of silk, stained with sweat. He heard whispers in every room, coins clinking in the walls, jewels breathing in his drawers, paintings blinking when he turned away. Then, suddenly, all went silent. He froze. The air felt heavy, as if the mansion were underwater. He tried to run but could not move. His feet stuck to the marble like sap. The mat began to glow. A whisper. Then a rumble. And then, Mbara appeared. Not through the door. Not through a window. He was simply there. A shadow folded into form, and the god spirit stood at the base of the staircase, staring up at Lumo. You broke the sacred law, Mbara said. Lumo fell to his knees. I didn't mean to, he cried. I gave it back the first time. I helped people. I built a new village, fed the poor. With what was not yours to take, Mbara replied. Lumo's voice cracked. Please. I'm sorry. I'll return it. I'll give it all back. Every coin. Every jewel. Just don't take me. But Mbara shook his head slowly. It is not yours to return anymore. The debt must be paid. The mat lifted. It hovered beside Lumo now, silent, pulsing. Then it moved, swift as lightning, wrapping around him like a snake. He screamed. Not in pain, but in fear. He clutched at his robes, at the mat, at anything. But his body was already fading. His legs disappeared first, then his chest, then his arms. His eyes bulged. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Then, he was gone. No blood. No body. Only coins remained on the ground, hundreds of them, glimmering gold. But each one whispered. They whispered his voice. Faint, desperate, Endless. Please, please. I just wanted more. The palace groaned. Without warning, the roof cracked in half. Golden walls crumbled. Statues split down the middle. Jewels popped from their sockets and turned to ash. The towers bent and fell like trees in a storm. The golden mansion collapsed into dust. The coins melted into sand. The silk turned to cobwebs. By dawn, nothing remained but cracked stones and vines. Lumor's land had vanished, swallowed by time itself. The people gathered slowly. No one spoke. No one dared enter the ruins. But the priestess stepped forward, her staff in hand. She picked up one coin from the ashes. It was cool, dull, lifeless. She held it to her ear. A whisper. Please. She dropped it quickly. The villagers finally understood. The mat had not been a gift. It had been a test. And Lumor had failed. That evening, the elders gathered in silence around the village fire. The chief spoke. Some gifts, he said, are better left untouched. The others nodded. The forest would always whisper. Mora would always watch. And the mat? The mat would wait for the next soul too hungry to listen.